I hope you're doing well. Today I want to show you how to paint peonies in a very simple way. So what you need for this tutorial, you'll need watercolors of your choice. It can be student grade, artist grade, your favorite brand, mix of brands, it really doesn't matter. Just go to something that you feel comfortable and excited about using, that's the key. I've got a Daniel Smith here palette, which I have put together years ago, and these were kind of my sort of favorite colors. And I really like them for botanical art, although I want to put together a separate botanical art palette and share those colors with you, which I will be doing in due course. So I'm super excited about it myself. As you can imagine, always putting a watercolor palette together is a fun exercise to do, and I haven't done that in what feels like years actually, apart from the watercolor palettes that I make myself, so that would probably count towards that. Okay, so what else do you need? You will need some sort of mixing tray. If you have a palette which already comes with a mixing tray, that's fine. Otherwise, some sort of little dish or tray for mixing, and brushes. Let's talk about brushes. Also, apart from brushes, you'll need some sort of either napkin or a rag, whatever you like using. I've got this from a previous project which I still want to utilize. In terms of brush sizes, I have 3 brushes here, and they're all by Princeton. So I've got a heritage brush, which is a round 3, and it's basically great for when I don't want to have too much water in the brush. And then I have a round 4, which is a Neptune. Neptunes are softer bristles and they keep loads of water in there. And then for detail, I have a 3-0, which is a velvet touch. I actually love all of the handles from the Princeton brushes. I love the design. I love the fact that they're gold, the barrels, and they're just kind of really aesthetically pleasing. And so, but when it comes to just tactile sensation, the velvet touch is my favorite. They just have fabulous kind of smooth, very smooth. I mean, they're all smooth, but just a different sensation. Slightly almost rubberized, but very fine detail. And also they're very light, all of them. The Princeton brushes are super light, so I do like using them for smaller details and things like that. Okay, so paper and sketchbooks, whatever you like to use or feel comfortable. I'm going to use a sketchbook today. This is a Jackson's, which is 35% cotton paper, watercolor paper, and it is 160 GSM, so it does buckle somewhat, but I don't mind, especially when I'm playing around or doing tutorials. I love to kind of have a bigger spread and have more space to play around. So we covered paper, we covered the tools, and we covered watercolor, and yeah, we are ready to start. So to begin with, I will show you how to start with basically your brush control. So let me just show you with the greenery. Now, with the greenery, I first started with this element, and this has been inspired from my older sketchbooks. And this is exactly why I don't tire ever mentioning the importance of a sketchbook, going back to, rather than loose pieces of paper randomly scattered throughout my studio, I like to have a sketchbook that I can flip through and find the inspiration from older paintings that I've done. So that way, if you don't want to be influenced by someone's style, then go back to your own and kind of repurpose the painting that you've done. So here, for example, we are looking all the way back to 2017 when I did a 7-day watercolor challenge for flowers, or with flowers rather, and on day 4 I had this was July, yeah, in July for the watercolor month. It'd be great to do something this July, but I just don't know if I will have the time for it. So this was fun. This was back in the day when I didn't have a business and summer was a lot more like free. So, and then I also started doing these other kind of shapes. So I'll show you how to draw this type of a shape of a leaf, and then also these more loose shapes where you need to control or learn how to control your brush. So let's start with, first of all, I'll show you a little difference between the two brushes. So this is the Heritage round 3. I'm going to mix up a bit of a green, and for that I'm going to use rich green and gold, and I will add some sub green into it. And so I'll show you here at the top. So it's about pushing down and lifting and making sure there's plenty and plenty of water, and then I'd go in again and do literally just one move, one little stroke with your brush, and create this kind of leaf element. Now you can also connect them, and that would become your one leaf. And then another thing I want to show you is one of those. So let's mix up a little different shade, adding a bit more yellow. So with this leaf we have like a center which is slightly wider, and then we connect slightly lower to smaller parts of the leaf, and then we bring it to a pointy bottom like so. That's another way of illustrating a leaf. And of course you can connect them and create like a vine look. So if this one is going slightly more down, then you can somewhere here rotate. This time I'm going to go center, and connect the leaves. So just think about 3 parts, the middle being longest, and then 2 smaller parts on each side. Yeah, this is pretty much it. Then it's going to be a variation of the 2, and sometimes you will see me create like so as we've done here, but I would, so in the first example I would then go and create like a double, or I would also do like a single as well. So in some cases it's just literally a single. So let's go this direction. And you can also kind of create curves in the leaves as well. So for instance, if these are a bit straight, the other thing you can do is just curve it more. And another thing that looks good is if you curve them to the same direction. So for example, I'll show you what doesn't really work. If you go like that, and then if you go like this, then in my opinion doesn't look that great. It just kind of, you know, points into different directions. But what does work, if you go like so, and then you go like so, and then you can also, as a afterthought, thicken things up or change them slightly. You can then start adding things to it. So for example, you can then play with the shape a little bit more, and then this way you can start building little clusters of greenery. So just to show you a difference between this brush and the Princeton Neptune, which holds more water, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to show you an example somewhere over here. It's a lot wetter. And sometimes you might find that creating a thinner detail with this brush is a little bit more challenging. So let's do another example. So pushing and lifting, and again pushing and lifting. But if you're working on a larger scale, you probably would want something that carries more water so you don't run out of water too quickly. So I find that with the Princeton Heritage, I was able to achieve these fine tips without needing to go in afterwards. So just from one brush stroke I would get there, whereas here you can see the tips are slightly more rounder. And that's just the nature of this brush. So let me also show you the first leaf that we've done. I think for now I'm going to go into the Neptune for this part, because I'm going to work with a larger area. So we're going to do the bud next. And for the bud I'm going to mix up some sort of like a coral type of a color. So I've got already orange in here, and I'm just going to go in with a bit of pink. And that's a color that looks nice to me. Maybe with a bit of opera pink in there. Okay, so for the bud it's really super easy. What you need to think of it is like a round golf ball shape, and we're going to start by pressing on the brush and going all the way around and creating a round sphere shape without connecting the top part. Now what we're going to do is at the top, see how the leaf is right here, like it sort of has this torn part. So think of peonies, observe them. It's currently their season and my garden is full of peonies, and there's also a field near us where you can go and pick your own peonies, which is just stunning. And I'm totally inspired by it. So here we go. That is the torn edge of the petal. And what we're going to do next is add another leaf on top, which is going to be nice and smooth at the top. And then you're going to create that torn part pointing inside there, like that. Just using the very tip of the brush. Also remember not to connect the two leaves to suggest that there is a gap between them. Now we're going to do the same on the final third leaf. So again, starting somewhere here, leaving a little gap and creating a torn edge. So something like that. And then as an afterthought, once you've done with that, and if you see you want to round things up a little bit, you can go ahead and do that. If you find that something is not quite sitting right shape-wise, there you go. I might as well go in a bit longer down here. And that's it. Another thing I like doing is wetting the bottom of this peony, and to do that I'm going to go about halfway in, or most part in, and then add some like a darker pink mix and just add it right at the bottom. Just creates a bit more interest. And rather than looking flat, you are adding a bit of something to your peony. Also, sometimes you can pull the color through like that, so it looks like a flame. And that part, we're going to wait for things to dry. While waiting, I'm also going to lift. It's called a lifting technique in watercolor. And just, you can do this when the color is completely dry, but I find it's always easier to do that when it's still wet, because sometimes it's harder to remove. So here this part was already dry, so I will need like a tissue to then carefully go in and lift it just where I wetted, like so. Personally, I prefer the first option. And what that does, it creates a lovely kind of like a highlight on the petals, as you can see I've done here. And now let's focus on the green area. So I'm going to swap back to the Heritage. You don't need to do this, you can stay with the same brush. I just prefer how it works with the water. So what we're going to do here, we're going to create the green part of the leaf. And now try not to touch this, which I already done. So we're going to have some of the pink leaking into here, but generally try not to do that. And then we're going to create the greenery. So the greenery here is the same technique as we've done before. So you are pushing gently, and then towards the middle your brush is completely pushed down, and then lift it gently as well. And you see with this brush I can create this lovely pointy bit. I'm going to do the same right next to it, like so. This time the leaf is going to curl upwards. And now you can, as you are painting, you can always add a little bit of color here and there and just have a fun time mixing things, just so you have a bit of variety. So now I'm going to do that here with the slightly different color mix. And you can see if there is not enough moisture, straight away go in and bring this color in. It can happen sometimes. So I will leave it at 3 leaves at the bottom. If you wanted to add more, go for it and do that. So now I'm looking and it looks like it's sort of almost dry here, so I can swap now to the finer brush for the detail. And I'm going to go into Indian Yellow. And did I tell you what colors are mixed here? I kind of had already a mix of some sort of maybe Aussie Red Gold and some alizarin Crimson and Quinacridone Pink and Opera Pink. So that's the colors that we had mixed up here, just in case you wonder. So let me show you. I'll talk you through the other pinks when I'm mixing them, but basically we're looking at somewhere along here. Okay, so next, Indian Yellow. That's going to be my yellow of choice. I quite like it. And there's also Nicolaise Yellow, which I even love more than Indian Yellow, but it's not in this palette, so it would definitely make it into my botanical palette. Do let me know if that's a video you would really want to watch. So just filling in this area, creating little strokes. So I'll show you somewhere here. Basically all we're doing is we don't want a bubble of paint hanging. We're basically creating these little marks like so. And that's our pollen or stigma. So that's the mark making that we're doing. Tiny little sticks in a way. They're not dots, they're sticks. So that is our bud, and you can play with the shapes. You can create like slightly elongated shapes. You can be less round. So in fact, let me just show you a fun little shape that you can do, which is less controlled. So for that, I have some leftover of the Indian yellow here, and I'm just going to add some opera pink and create a lovely bright coral. Okay, so let me go a bit more this side here and the bottom. So I'm just going to do a similar thing here, but it's not going to be a completely oval shape. It's going to be a little bit more relaxed. So here we go. And then we're going to go in and basically do exactly as we did before. Think of it as that way, so the petal comes in and covers it. And then this petal won't be going as far down, and it's also going to close things up a little bit. Think where you want the color to be concentrated. In my case, I want it to be at the bottom, like so, and then lift the color from the tip of the petal. Make sure you're using a clean brush, not much water on it, and then just trying to lift it, and then take a tissue, and there you go, done. So this is a more dramatic effect. It lifted better than the other one. And let's go in with the green again. In fact, this time I'll show you with the same brush so you know the difference. So again, we're going to do, and then holding it and lifting, and again holding and lifting. And this time we're going to go up like so. Didn't have enough water, so all I'm doing is just going at the top, on the top, like with the second layer. And in this case, I'm going to create more leaves. Really going to go for it. And we've got like 5 leaves here. Okay, I prefer this way. It just feels a lot more controlled, and also I just like the look of it. Okay, same thing with the yellows. I'm going to go for a finer brush. In fact, you could stick with the same brush, but then it would be more kind of dotted rather than this detail. So what I'm going to do is create these little sticks. There we go. And you can add more density right in the middle and then sparse them out. That's another thing you can do. So two examples of birds that you can play with and create different shapes. Now, what if the color comes out quite flat? So for instance, here, I think the colors that I used, they don't have enough watercolor effect. So what you can do in that instance is mix up a more deeper tone of what you think the color was before, kind of match it a little bit, and then with a much darker color, I'm going to go in at the bottom of the petal, like so. Now wash the brush out, water control, and then just pull it up like so. So can you see it's suddenly really popping? And we're going to do that right at the tip of these leaves as well, or petals rather. If you have a hard edge somewhere, same thing, go in and just blend it in. So that looks a lot better. Next I will show you how to paint a very simple next I will show you how to paint a very simple version of a peony. So technically you could argue that it sort of almost looks like a hibiscus, which it sort of is, a mix of the two, but with the hibiscus there needs to be a pistil. If you added the pistil, then that would be 100% a hibiscus, but without it I kind of can take that creative license and mix and match things and just have fun with it. So let me start by creating a light wash. So the key here for this particular style of the flower is to create a lovely light wash that is not dark at all. We're not aiming here for color, and I will explain why. We need to start quite lightly. So I'll go with that, adding more water to it still. And what we're going to do is we're going to create 4 petals. So starting similarly as I started with the first 2, except they're not going to be as round. They're going to have a pointier end right here. And then again, think about these torn petal edges, and then just fill in the entire petal. Once you've done that, go in with your darker color, so in my case it's quinacridone pink, and just touch it right at the tip of it, like so. Going back into the light mix and creating second petal, like so. And again, adding quinacridone pink right at the tip of it. Back into the light mix. And we're going to repeat this process 4 times. And this is the simplest way of creating a lovely peony inspired illustration. Okay, back in. So as you can see, I'm not touching the petals, I'm kind of leaving them separated slightly. Okay, and then same thing with the darkest color right here. And if the color or the first layer was still too wet and the color moved out too much, then you can go with a very thick paste of this same color and just put it right in the tip. You can see here it's sort of flowing a bit too much. What you can do is dry your brush up and just lift it ever so slightly. Like so. Then I'm going to focus on the greenery for this flower, because to add the dark parts it needs to be completely dry. So let's focus on the green parts. I'm going to go to my preferred brush here, Heritage. Let's mix up sap green, and this time I'm going to add some blue, which is the Inthanterone blue, and let's go with lemon yellow. I kind of like my greens to have a bit more muddier look. So about there. And here I'm going to show you that sort of fun greenery leaf style, which is more it's kind of like more feathery. Then you can also connect them and just add these leaves throughout the illustration. Okay, and then I'm just going to build on the green parts, on the green leaves. Create as many or as few as you like. It's very easy to get carried away and just enjoy building on the leaves because it's so easy and just looks really, really pretty. So I'll leave it at that, otherwise I could just carry on, and it is a lot of fun. The other thing that you may want to do is just make sure the leaves or the green parts come in as much as possible into the illustration so that they don't look like they're just stuck in the air. Now if you finished a color that it was mixed before, try to mix a similar color. You only will need tiny little bit just to connect them pull them in a little bit more, like so. Don't worry about this part in the middle being completely white, because we will use that to add the black elements into there. So the next style of a beautiful peony I will show you is again making a very complicated looking peony which has loads and loads of layers of petals, but I will make it easy and I will break it down for you to be able to paint it. So if you're happy with staying with the bud and this more simpler version of the peony, then you can totally do that. You could, for example, add, instead of 4 and kind of have it less hibiscus looking, you could add 5 petals, for instance, or you could just add some petals popping out from behind. But I will show you another way of creating a peony flower which is filled and filled with layers of petals. So for this example we will need again a mix that is quite light to begin with, because it's all going to be about layers and we're going to layer thicker mixtures. So firstly it will be very, very light, and then as we go we add a little bit more pigment, so to speak. So let's put one, so let's do one up here. So we'll start again, we'll start this time with 3. So similar shape of the petal as we've done before, the kind of the torn edge. And only 3 petals, so give more space in between the leaves, the petals rather. Make sure your brush is filled with the pigment so it doesn't run out. So that's your first layer, and correct it if you want. And you leave that to dry completely before you do the next layer. Touch it with the back of your hand, and if it feels exactly the same as the paper, then you're good to go. So for next layer we're going to mix up a slightly different tint. This is going to be a bit more pinkier, and it will have a little bit more color. But the idea here is you want to see the colors layered. So we're going to do the same thing but just rotate. So we're going to do 3 petals but just rotate them to fill the gaps right here, like so. So then you can see these 2 petals underneath there. And we're going to continue 2 more petals. And 1 more. Just like that. So that's 6 petals layered, and this technique in watercolor is called glazing. So you are glazing a wet watercolor over a dry, so they're not blending in as we've done wet and wet here. Another lovely watercolor technique. This is going to be hard edge on the previous. So you want to achieve, rather than a blended merged effect, you want there to be a separation of the two colors. Again, wait for it to completely dry. So while this is getting there, I'm going to show you how I add these details right here. So I'm going to go into my Payne's Grey. I prefer it as an alternative to a black watercolor. And then I just do these 3 rather thick marks, and all it is, I'll show you here, is basically creating a thick mark like so, one down below and one like that, and that is our center of the flower. What you're doing here is you are minimizing that white space in the middle. If you didn't have that white space and the petals were quite close together, you wouldn't get such a dramatic effect, because having a white background up against the dark gray or almost black color, it just makes it pop more. So this is how I prefer it. And that flower is now completely done. If you wanted to, of course, you could go ahead and create more detail, but when it comes to modern botanical art, for me, the simpler things are, the more effective they are and the prettier they are. I don't like when things are overworked, but again, you do you as you prefer your botanical art. It's absolutely fine. Stay true to your style is what I say. So now we're going to go back into quinacridone pink, and I am going to mix up a thicker mix, and I'm thinking whether into that I should perhaps, now I'm going to stay just with the quinacridone pink and add whatever I have in the tray from the previous mixes, just to tone the color slightly more down. And now we're going to go back to where we were and repeat the step, but this time just make the petal smaller, and you can see it's a lot darker as well. So we're going to do that. We still are maintaining those lovely layers. I just realized I placed my petal incorrectly, which is okay. So I'm going to turn it into a 4-petal center, but you can just do the 3 again. Or 4 if you want it a bit more fuller. I think the 4 works nice as well, but I will have to put something to break down the 4, because the 3 works better. So what I'm going to do is, now while things are still drying, I'm just going to take a wet brush, clean brush, and just soften the edges, just kind of to create a more blended effect here. And it's okay if it's just going to go everywhere and become like a bit of a watercolor mess. So we're softening down this top layer and essentially creating visual layers. So like that. Again, I'm going to wait for it to dry and I'm going to come back. So now finally, I'm going to mix up, I'm thinking, let's go for something like quinacridone sienna into here. And with that in mind, I am going to just add those 3 but smaller leaves. So focusing this time, making sure I'm not going to make any mistakes. And just like that. So here we go. All I'm doing is just widening the bottom of the petal just to kind of connect them almost. I'll show you a little close-up. So because I made the mistake, I wanted to still go in and create that extra layer. So at the moment we have 4 layers, but technically you should be okay with just the 3 layers if you wanted to. But of course, you know, you can build upon it and just create a very fluffy type of a flower. That's in essence what we're doing, which is really easy, rather than thinking about where to layer one petal and then the other one where one is coming out from the underneath and one going over the top. It's just really, really complicated, and this is where it's traditional rather than modern. With modern, it's all about simplifying things, but still having it quite effective and pretty and beautiful to look at. So let's wait for this to dry, and then I'll show you how to do the finishing touches. Now, looking at the center, what we're going to do is create exactly those dots, or not dots, the little sticks that we did beforehand, but this time we're going to go around. So I'll show you a little example what I've done here. I've done this flower just using watercolor, and you can see it is quite difficult to make that yellow pop, whereas in actual fact these stamens are very, very bright in a peony. They are kind of, when you can see them, especially in these peonies that open up fully, they are just so gorgeous. So what I'm going to do today is I'll show you how to incorporate a little bit of gouache, and this is actually acrylic gouache, so I'm just going to take a very small amount of it. You won't need much, but basically gouache is a good paint to use in places like this where you need it to, not sure what happened there, but it just erupted on me. Gone very, very liquid, this one. So this particular color is mustard, so it's a little bit muted. I don't have many yellows when it comes to gouache paints. The other yellow I have is a deep yellow, which is more of an orange, and I don't want that. So what I'm going to do here, using a very fine brush, I'm just going to basically focus the stamen, just going around like so. First I'm going to do one circle of it, and then I'm going to go in and create a second kind of layer with slightly smaller marks. So achieving this with watercolor is impossible. Even if you create the thickest mix, it's just not going to pop as much. So this is where it's quite good to go into paints like this and just explore it a little bit more. Even though you want to use strictly watercolor, sometimes just going for it and being a bit more open-minded when it comes to combining other mediums with watercolor is a good thing to do. So this is looking very, very neat and very kind of realistic. I could go a bit wider, but I don't want to completely cover everything else we have built on beforehand with all the layers of the petals. So I'll show you the difference. So this is the gouache. You can see how beautiful it is. And then here is the Indian yellow watercolor, which you can hardly see it. It's, yeah, and this was like the thickest mixed, hardly any water there. So that's a good thing to try. Okay, the next thing to do would be to add the center, which in the peony is green. So this seed pods, at this point when the flower really opens up, you can start seeing those big green seed pods that later will develop into proper big brown seeds. So while they're green, they're really a beautiful kind of detail to the flower. Now you could go again with green watercolor, which I've done and I didn't like, because again, very similar to the yellow, it just gets lost there. So it could be an idea to again go with gouache or stick with watercolor but add like a different color and just be more creative. You don't have to do everything by the books. You can go with, you know, a black and just make it your own, or even something else if you can think of maybe a burgundy color that you like or something like that. So naturally what I would do here is add some black or Payne's grey rather, and call it a day. But since I already showed you that technique, I thought I'll show you a slightly different way, which is I'm going to mix two colors. So I've got leaf green, this is again the Holbein gouache acrylic or acrylic gouache, and the second color is olive. I haven't really mixed gouache paints before. I like to use them as they come. So it's a factor of like something new and something where you think, well, I actually love the flower as it is right now, and I hope I'm not going to ruin it at this point, because, you know, you put a lot of time into it and effort. But, you know, we can't progress with our skills. We cannot learn from being afraid. And so I urge you that if this feels a little bit out of your comfort zone, just give yourself a little push, you know, you might really love what comes out. And so I'm going to mix up a lovely bit of a green. And I'm wondering if this is the color I like. This is a bit too yellow here. I need a bit more green. Maybe just add a little bit more of this leaf green back in. So it's more juicy that way. Okay, this is good. So what we're going to do is paint these marks, but in a different color. So I'm going to add one up here, another one next to it, and a third one. And if you think that they're not popping enough, which can happen, give it some time to dry, and you could go over the top with another mix, for example. I'm just going to make them slightly larger like so. So let things dry, and then I really want this to pop. And I think at first I was afraid to just use this color as it comes, but I think it would look nice. So I'm just going to go on top and add this color. I didn't want it to look a little bit too garish, so hence why. But it does pop really, really nicely. So I'll show you a close-up. And you can of course mix your own green and spend a little bit more time doing that and find the right shade. Essentially, I do like how things look, but it's like maybe not my favorite tone. So that's why I'm kind of fussing about with it a little bit too much. So I'm just going to add a bit of water. And make it a bit more translucent so we have the color from before pop up a little bit more. Okay, so final thing to do is just the greenery, and exactly what we've done before. I can also actually show you the other type of the greenery that we haven't done. So let me just mix up a lovely green here. I'm going to add a little bit of green apatite, and I'll show you how to create these types of leaves. So I'm going to go down first and add the other parts of the leaf. And then add a little bit more green to it. And I'm going to add one more up here. And another one. Change the direction of where they're facing. That's what will make it more interesting. And of course the size of it as well. And then I'm going to create one more here. And then I'm just going to remove the clam and then just add a couple of those wispy bits to it as well. So at this point, this part here looks a bit empty, so I'm just going to work on that. Okay, so this is looking quite pretty. So purely because I have enough of white space here, I'm thinking of continuing this area into like a cascaded type of a leaf. Like, you know, this is again completely up to you if you feel like adding on more to it. This is more of a composition playtime and something that you can leave it, or you can do it if you wanted to. Then I'm going to create a smaller one. Just down here. Like so. There we go. And you could continue even more, but you know, it is up to you. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I completely got carried away. You know, I was planning this to be a realistic 20-minute tutorial, but you know me, I like to share the knowledge with you that I have gained throughout the years of being here on YouTube. In the beginning of my botanical watercolor journey, I wouldn't know where to start when it came to peonies. I love peonies, always did, and just learning how to create a peony in a more accessible way, something that isn't scary to start and something that is recognizable and dainty and pretty looking, makes me quite happy to share that with you. So thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you feel about it, how you would like to approach your peony studies, and whether you enjoy blending in some other mediums or you prefer to stick to watercolor strictly. And yeah, I will see you next time in our Watercolour Fridays. See you then.